So I'm delighted to have as my guest today Mary Kay Schneider, who is the founder of MK Insights to Action, a consulting firm, which she started after a long career in commercial banking, which spanned a number of decades. I won't go into how many, but included a lot of work in the small business segment, both on the sales side, on the credit side, overseeing a centralized underwriting function, and involved with the wealth conversations that small business owners are currently seeking or often seeking from their bankers. So, Mary Kay, delighted to have you with us. I did ask you before whether there was any part of the banking industry that you did not touch, and you said the one area was the trust area.
Right. I was never a trust officer. I tried to attend trust school to learn some of the basic concepts of it, but I was not a trust officer.
Well,
I left that expertise to others who are qualified.
I'm dazzled with the breadth of your banking experience. The other thing I've been impressed by recently are some of the articles that you've written. And one of the articles that caught my attention was about the challenge that a lot of banks face, which is in growing deposits. And you published an article a few months ago that I would encourage people to seek out. Now, where's the best place for people to find the article that I'm referencing?
So they can find that on my website, which is MK Insights to Action, the number 2, action.com. And they can also find it on my LinkedIn company page by the
Okay.
same name.
I'd strongly encourage people to take a look at it because you were focusing on industries where bankers ought to at least consider the opportunities, because these are opportunities for transactional growth in deposits. What we're going to talk about today is deposits, but I'd like to take it from the vantage point of the sales manager, because I think it's really important for sales managers to know how to guide people toward the right opportunities. And I do think that your expertise will be helpful in that area. So what are some of the resources that sales managers ought to utilize to help their teams identify the best opportunities?
Well, I think the first step, because sales managers are great teachers and coaches to elevate their team's performance, they can look to those stars on their team that are already doing well with that, and they can identify some of those industries that are higher in deposits. They can look over the existing client base for their team and take a look at what are some examples of accounts that we already have and what are the nature of those businesses. They can take a look at the geographic area and what is predominant in their area and compare that to the kind of known higher deposit industries. And, one of the ways that you can spot some of that would be, well, what are the most profitable industries that, you tend to see?
Mm-hmm.
What are also some companies that have high liquidity ratios? I mean, they have to have, you look at their current ratio or the quick ratio, and you can see, are they funded pretty well in those industries to be able to take care of inventory if they have it and those expenses and to carry that, to be able to pay their employees. It might be other types of industries, perhaps manufacturing, where they're setting aside funds to maintain equipment, to be able to replace equipment at some point in time. There's a lot of different industries, and they're higher in deposits for different reasons. I mean, law firms are ones that have higher deposits. Perhaps they are getting awarded settlement. Their funds are being made by taking a piece of a settlement, or it might be that they are managing escrow accounts for a client. Those types of things. There are a number of healthcare types of businesses. Dental practices come to mind. Also thinking through, dental laboratories, for example, and the funds that are available there. Specialist doctors, some of those being covered by insurance or not. Veterinarians, where some of that is really private pay. So there's a number of, you can find resources to look at through IBIS World that will be able to help identify some of those deposit-rich types of industries. But you can also find it too, just some general ideas by doing a Google search.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And your recommendation to assess the landscape, starting with customers, because there
Right.
could well be, and usually are, some lessons in the customer base, in addition to perhaps some low-hanging fruit. You and I both
Right.
know that a lot of commercial relationships have not been fully mined for deposits, and that sometimes includes the personal deposits
Right.
of the principals in businesses. The second element to this, and I think the idea of assessing the broader marketplace and understanding what's out there and what would be the best opportunities. Because in point of fact, and you saw this when you were at PNC, I'm sure, is you look across markets, what might be a really attractive opportunity in one market doesn't exist in another, or the skill set of the bankers might not be necessarily as strong in one area as another. So making some sense out of the market does require a sales manager to really work one-on-one with people to help them come
Right.
up with a good deposit prospect list.
That's
You
exactly right.
yeah. Yeah, and you referenced some good tools. I think industry information is wonderful today. IBIS World for sure. The people at Vertical IQ have done a
Vertical
nice
IQ.
job.
Absolutely.
Have really given people some templates for both identifying opportunities, but then also planning. And I guess I'm curious from your vantage point, because you manage sales teams and people who are managing salespeople, what kind of pre-call preparation in planning would you expect bankers to do before going out to target deposit-rich relationships?
Well, I would say they really need to understand the profitability of that industry and also take a look at what are some of the trends that are taking place. What has been a revenue growth trend, for
Mhm.
example, in the most recent past, and what is it projected to be in the future? I think they should have awareness of their suppliers and customers to know
Mhm.
what kinds of factors impact those businesses as well. It could impact whether, certain types of customers are going to have the wherewithal to continue to buy. They should be knowledgeable about competitors as well
Mhm.
and what are some new technologies or go-to-market strategies that are perhaps either benefiting the prospective customer they want to go visit or are benefiting someone else, and they need to be cued in to that.
Mhm.
What are the opportunities that are on the landscape, and
Mhm.
what is the company doing to make themselves ready for that and to be able to capitalize on it? So I think the more they know about the industry and can be conversant in
Mhm.
that, the more they'll differentiate themselves and the more they'll feel confident being
Mhm.
in that setting with that business owner.
Yeah, 100%. I also have been pleased to see, at least among some of the clients we worked over the years, a greater sensitivity to understanding the cash flow cycle, how money
Right,
moves through the businesses, and really
right.
drilling down into that as a way to understand where there may be things that are not perfect. Or something that may be an issue for people to consider, which does sort of lead to the question about engagement with cash management, treasury management partners. And
Yeah.
how do you see the teamwork between a banker and their treasury management officer playing out in the best circumstances?
Yeah, in the best circumstances, I see them collaborating as a team and giving each other ideas on a regular basis. Very often, the banker might be the one who has the closer relationship with that particular business, who might have started that calling effort. But I really encourage them to bring that cash management officer in quickly
Mhm.
and position their value and talk about those situations where the two of them have worked together successfully to
Mhm.
solve a pressing business issue for that business. And then what was the outcome of that? Being able to
Mhm.
share, not naming the business at all, but just being able to share the outcome of that and really position that cash management officer as the expert in
Yeah.
being able to deliver that, as well as making that process easy.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess one of the things that I've tried to get my clients to think about is the kind of stories that are illustrative of exactly what you talked about. What was the problem or the
Yeah.
situation? how did we as a team, as an organization, address the problem? What was it that we were able to bring to the table? And then what was the result? I mean, it's a very simple model, but bankers need to be better at telling the story as opposed to boring into the details of how their products work. Because I think people are going to respond to the story, whatever it is. So
I think so too. They'll make that direct correlation, between what they're hearing about and how it could work in
yeah.
practice in their business. And then the next step for them too is their staff, and
Mm-hmm.
how is a change of how they do things today going to land on their staff, and how can their staff be ready to accept that change and be confident in a new way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that becomes an important component too, between the banker and the cash management officer, to figure that out and help that really work seamlessly, and
Yeah.
check in during that onboarding process.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. So let me ask you a question. Now, this is strategic because you spent the better part of your career working for very large financial institutions. How does a community bank compete against the likes of your former employer?
Well, definitely the larger banks have invested greatly in the treasury management, the cash management services, and those tools. So let's create a bigger backdrop, behind the community banking organization and what those clients value, and what the strength and the hallmark of the community banks are, which is the strength of that relationship, the value of the service they provide, the closeness to that local community
Mhm.
and all of the residents and employees there, businesses there, and folks see that. For businesses, they see that steadfast commitment to their credit philosophy. They don't get in and out of
Mhm.
different industries and not be consistent. I mean, they're very predictable from that standpoint. So you have that standing behind you, and you end up having some longer tenure among the
Mhm.
folks that you tend to work with. So I think the community banks have all of that going for them. And if they are missing a particular part of the product set that they hear regularly about from their clients, from the prospects, they've got to raise that up, and they've got to look for other opportunities within the organization to see, is there another organization we can partner with to be able to
Mhm.
deliver that? Is there something that we can do in the interim?
Mhm.
Other types of services that will be beneficial for the organization to enable them to continue to have success doing the banking. But from the cash management side of the equation, businesses need to have ways to speed up receivables. They need to have ways to make payments without using checks. They need the wire service. They need information reporting. And, they can benefit from the purchasing card. And importantly, they need ways to reduce fraud. So a community bank can take a look at how do they do that today? How well do they serve it? They can have focus groups with their clients and hear directly about some of their gaps too, if those persist in the organization, and then make a plan to begin to tackle that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've often tried to drive home for a lot of community bankers by bringing into the conversation, say, a new employee who may have been a refugee from a larger organization, and ask them to compare the bread and butter cash management product offering of the community bank with what they had at, say, Bank of America, to pick a name out of the hat. And almost invariably, people say, for a certain size business, most small to medium sized businesses, the cash management offerings that a lot of community banks are able to muster are just as good. And it's surprising to some people in community banks that that's the case. Not true universally. I mean, there certainly are requirements of organizations that a community bank can't really accommodate. Multi-currency cash management is not something that most people are thinking about. But bread and butter stuff, I think, is good. So this has been great, Mary Kay. I appreciate that. So if people are interested in finding out more and following you and getting some access to some of your thought leadership, where should they go?
They can go to my LinkedIn company page, NK Insights to Action, the number 2 action, or they can go directly to my website, nkinsightstoaction.com.
Great. Well, thank you again for spending time with us. This is a great conversation, and I think you've given sales managers some good insights. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Ned. I appreciate it.